I want to draw your attention to the next document. Then I'm going to go to the last report. Then we are done on this subject.
We need to conclude, yeah.
Yes. So the next, on page 238, MM22. On page 238 is the competency assessment of Mr. Sibiya for the position that he would have applied for. I know that Honorable Songwe went into this document. I'm not going to bother you about it, and we know the answers. This is dated the 22nd of November. Remember, the appointment of letter of General Sibiya is dated what? The 8th. This fellow was appointed before a competency assessment was concluded, and he failed it. So what should have happened is that his appointment should have been reversed because he did not fulfill, he did not pass the competency requirements. In actual fact, there ought not to have been an appointment without knowing if he's competent or not. So that is one last, I'm going to just go to the last report, the one that now suddenly in January, he becomes the head of department. So you've got a fellow who failed a competency assessment for a junior position only in November. They've been told by a legal opinion, you can't make him an HOD, he must apply. And then there's a report of 4th of November that tells him, for this position, it's going to be a contractual position. It's not the same as his position. Now, let's go to the report of January 2017. It's on page 220. It's annexure MM19. Page 220, annexure MM19. So, I'm answering your question, Counsel. Now, with that background in mind, with everybody else knowing, you cannot make this fellow an HOD. In actual fact, he ought not to have been a Unit 8 in the very first place. So here's the report. This report now, it updates the report of the 4th. You remember there was a restructuring. So this report is an updated report of the report of the 4th of November. What I want to draw your attention about this report under introduction on page 220, under introduction. I'm reading the first paragraph under introduction, right? It says, I want to read the entire paragraph if you can. The structure of JIRAS was approved by the mayor in August 2013. Further changes were made to the structure to move the security investigation functions.
Maybe a bit too close to the microphone there.
Sorry?
Okay.
So I'm reading the first paragraph under introduction, because this is how Sibiya becomes the head of department. He becomes the head of department by declaration. Somebody just declares head of department, it becomes one. So he says, this report says, so it gives a history of this restructuring. It says further changes were made to the structure to move the security and investigation function to report to the group internal audit on the 5. A decision was made to establish this unit as a separate business unit, which was approved on the 4th of November. We've been to the report of the 4th of November. Read the next sentence. Since the approval of the report reflected in Annexure C. That's a report of the 4th of November. The official responsible for this function has been appointed by the city. That is false. That is false. So this is, and they say this official has his inputs and requirement now motivates the refinement and the amendment of the structure. I want us to go to the signatures of this report. Then I'm done, Chairperson. If you go to the signatures of this report, you find them on page 225. I want you to look at who signs this report on page 225. General Sibiya signs this report under a bogus title of a commissioner. General Sibiya was never appointed as a commissioner. I've just shown you his appointment letter. So what you begin to see a general who becomes part of a scheme to claim a position that is not his. He uses a bogus title to be the commissioner. And look at the signatures. The very people who knew what the legal opinion was saying who signed the legal opinion on the 8th of November, and the same signatures, even more here. So it goes on to the next page and is signed by Mr. Mashaba on the 11th of January 2017. So you can't make this stuff up. You just can't. These documents were placed
You haven't made it up.
Sorry?
You haven't made it up.
No. The documents speak for themselves. So this is how General Sibiya becomes the head of department. I know that when he appears here, Honorable Songwe asked, how did you then move? Remember his salary there was 1.2 to 1.8. I'm not going to go to those documents at this stage. So I just wanted to show you. This is how General Sibiya becomes a head of department. The one thing that you will never do in local government, you can't escape compliance.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Mlandu,
I was being asked, Mesule, did you form up this thing of a fraud of 3.5 million? And I'm saying, just check in the 5 years that he's there, he earns a salary of a head of department. Here's the problem. In our environment, an appointment of a head of department and the conditions of a head of department must be approved by the council. And that's section 30, subsection 5C of the Municipal Structures Act. There's no other way. It says must. For the 5 years that he was there, none of that ever saw the light of day in council. So you've got a bogus head of department operating in the city of Johannesburg for 5 years. That's the salary part to it. Now, if you're a bogus head of department, then you get financial responsibilities, financial management responsibilities. You can't manage public funds. That is why then in the 5 years that he was there, he was responsible to manage a budget of 580 million. That is already irregular expenditure by virtue of the fact that he had no authority or license to manage public funds. In actual fact, he had no license to exist in the city of Johannesburg.
but it seems to have been condoned all the time by the council, whoever was in charge or in control.
Well, I can't speak for who would have done what. All I was just reflecting on was the document. So when you hear me talking about this 3.5 million is what you would have earned. And this is important because we know that in PRASA, Daniel Mtimkul is in jail today because he said he had a PhD and he got more salary. He's in jail today, serving 15 years, but not Shadrach Sibiya. We can't have that. General Khumalo today is going to court. General Khumalo. All that he did was to sit in a recruitment process. If you agree with me, this is worse. This is worse. But none of these people have been charged. None. And the NPA can't come and tell me here that there's nothing wrong about this. So if General Sibiya, if the NPA says it could not prosecute, there was no evidence. I've just showed it to you. And I have not even attached to this where General Sibiya admits to these documents in his own affidavit. He says, I've killed a man, here's the weapon. The NPA says, can't prosecute. It's not possible.
And you say in the letter that you addressed to us originally, or to the chair, honorable chair of the committee, that these have been brought to the attention of the MPA and the National Commissioner, your affidavit.
So proactively, because I did not want to delay this committee. Anybody who have got a sense of justice, I took this thing, I gave it to Shamila Batoy, it's there. And we even made further representations to say, look at this. This is indefensible. And we gave a copy of my affidavit to General Masemula. We gave a copy of my affidavit to the MEC of local government in Gauteng, the Speaker of the City of Johannesburg. None of them have made a move. And if you look at the signatures that you see on these documents, you should know why. It have got serious political implications. There's no doubt about it. So I've just dealt with the 580. The just one last thing, if I may, if your indulgence, Chair. The spyware, just the spyware. If I can just take you on 3 documents about the spyware, then I'm done. So the spyware, we know that the spyware, if you go on MM32, on page 329 to 336.
229.
329.
329.
329 to 329 to 336.
Yep.
Thanks, Chairperson. 329 to 336. Just the spyware. This is the report to procure this spyware. It's a report to procure this spyware. So this spyware was procured as part of the tools that Sibiya was procuring in the city of Geneva. He told you when he says, you know what? I want to see what is happening in the city. He said, I want to stay in my office and just see. That was his reason. So this is the report. It's called the War Room that he was referring to. And I want just quickly to take to the signatures. So on page 334, this is the report that bought the spyware. And you shall see there it says it is recommended that the acting commissioner for Group Forensics and Investigation Services approves the implementation and procurement of the War Room project tools, office, War Room finisher, and technical surveillance countermeasures. Total estimated 18 million. So these were the officials that were involved here. And if I may, if you go on page 337, that's the invoice that would have been served in respect of that spyware. And then on page 339, that's the proof of payment. On page 125, that's a letter of the State Security Agents.
125.
125. It's Annexure MM14. So having done all of these things, having bought what he bought, he then says 125. He then says, no, I bought these things because I was authorized by the State Security Agents. Here is the letter of the State Security Agency, dated the 22nd of July, right? And this letter is addressed to Dr. Palatse. So the State Security Agency was invited to conduct an inspection of these tools. So then on paragraph 3.1, it tells us that there is a technical surveillance tools. It says that it's used for identification of eavesdropping devices and cannot be repurposed to perform any other offensive or collection functions. So we know that there's one equipment that they found. They say this one, no, is not threatening. If you go to paragraph 4.
But which is also you now the State Security Agency.
Yes.
They obviously are responding to
a request.
A letter of 16 April, this letter of complaint.
Yes.
In paragraph 5 on page 126, the ambassador, the DG of SSA says, in light of the above, the SSA would like to conclude that there was no contravention of its governing legislation as alleged.
Indulge me a little bit. Go to paragraph 4. These are 2 equipments that are found. The spyware is on paragraph 4. So it says the other equipment of interest that was found in COJ room during the inspection is the digital forensic equipment. And then they tell you what a digital forensic is: the science of acquiring, preserving, retrieving, and presenting data that has been processed electronically. So the only thing that they say here, they say is governed by the ECTA, and it does not fall within the domain of intelligence services laws. It's normally utilized during criminal investigations. So we know that the SSA says it doesn't belong to their intelligence, what you call to their family of laws, of intelligence laws. So for you to know that there is a problem here about this spyware, you then have to go to the government gazette that was issued by the Minister of Justice in 2005. In that government gazette, any equipment that is capable of doing this, you can only procure it on authorization by the Minister of Justice. That's section 44 of RICA. If you do not have that authorization, then, and you procure this, then in terms of section 45, subsection 1, you have committed a crime of unlawful procurement and an unlawful possession. And if you're found with this type of equipment, then in terms of section 51, that's a criminal offense that carries a fine of 2 million rands or 10 years in jail. So this is an equipment that the SSA says we found, but the only problem is that it doesn't belong to our family. It's not the type of equipment that belongs to our family. So it's only, and then it tells you which legislation that is governed by. When you follow that legislation, then you shall land into RIC. This is where you need authorization from the Minister of Justice. And I know that the previous witness who was here before me did not deal with the law that is applicable to these things when you're dealing with the grabbers. Even if you're going to buy the grabber, that's why you need an authorization from the Minister of Justice. He didn't have this. So what does this then mean? We have spent 7.9 million on something that we can't use. So when you hear me then talking about, and this thing we don't know because it was procured in 2019, we don't know who else was sneaked with this thing, whose cell phones, laptops, or servers were entered into, because we only discovered this thing in 2022. So when you hear me accusing this fellow of engaging into some crime intelligence offenses, is because of this equipment that he had in possession, because the Act, Section 45, subsection 1, prohibits the procurement, the deployment, and the possession. Here's our problem, is that if then it's prohibited to possess, it means this is a continuing crime, because that means those things are still in the city of Johannesburg. Somebody's possessing them. It's a continuing crime up until this fellow is taken to court, is tried, and the judge pronounces what must happen to this equipment. So that's basically, those are the three things that we were bringing to the attention of General Bheki. We brought it to the attention of the Minister of Cocta. We brought to the attention of the NPA. You can't deny these documents. You just can't. So if the NPA was able to charge Ivan Pillay at SARS for unlawful interception in terms of Section 49, why are we having General Sibiya walking in the streets when there's a clear violation of Section 45? So that's basically it. So I'm here before you to say both the NPA and the ministers were alerted to this. They did not act. What was the consequence? The consequence is that on the 1st of July 2023, we had someone being promoted to be the second in charge of our police service. It can be when you're confronted by this.
Thank you.